Alright, so I'm going to try re-recording this presentation because the first one got lost. So I had it on Google on the cloud and then it just refused to download. But no matter, this is fine. You'll still get to listen. So here's my guide to time management. So just to start, I'd like to explain why you should care. So if you don't manage your time, there are a lot of things that could go wrong. I'm sure you could guess. So the first problem that I see with people is stress. So I know, being an engineering student, I know quite a lot of people who don't manage their time and then they get overwhelmed with their work and they just stress all the time because it's really easy to not start a homework assignment and then 2 days before it's due look at it and say, I got like 5 homework assignments and each one is going to take 3 or 4 hours. This sucks. And yeah, don't be that guy. And also, there is sleep deprivation to consider. I could go on tangents about the importance of sleep, but it's pretty obvious that sleep affects cognitive ability, it affects focus, so many things that you need when you're a student, or just in general, you don't want to get sleep deprivation because it can only cause problems. And actually, I'd like to show a little graph that I found here from Penn State. Adults generally should get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So these numbers actually aren't as bad as I expected. 50%, as you can see, are getting at least the 7 hours. 50% are not, of course. You could look at it either way. 50% not getting it, that's a lot. But the other half, they're doing well. And then, of course, you could consider, 7 hours isn't necessarily the ideal amount of sleep. I don't know about everyone else, but for me, I like to get 8. So the majority of people, if they have their choice, would like to at least get 8, I think. Certainly, if you're given the opportunity to have more, you'd take it. So that means that actually only 20% are getting that. That's even worse. That's really bad. But really, 7 is acceptable. Half of them are getting it, but half of them are not. So 50% of people need to learn how to manage their time. But enough with that. There's a little quote that I found here from the NIH. It was some guide about sleep, and I thought it was very interesting. They said that animal studies suggest that sleep is as vital as food for survival. That makes sense. You need to sleep or you die. But they said rats live normally 2 to 3 years, but they only live 5 weeks if they're deprived of REM sleep, and 2 to 3 if they're deprived of all sleep stages, a time frame similar to death due to starvation. So probably people didn't realize, you need food, you need sleep, you need water, but actually not getting sleep is just as bad as not getting food. And that kind of makes sense because if you ever try not eating for a day, it's pretty hard to get through it. And if you try not sleeping for a day, it's also pretty hard. So get your sleep. Now, I think that's enough introduction. So let's actually go over the time management strategies. Pretty much an overview of what I'm going to talk about. First, you need to know what work you have each week. It sounds really stupid, right? Of course you know what work you have, but really, if you, after the first week or two, get an idea of what kind of assignments you're going to have, if you know every week on Wednesday this assignment is going to be due, every Friday we're going to have readings to do, it just helps to make a list of those things. And then, of course, you have to plan when you'll do it. I'll go over that in detail. Also, being realistic. So I will also go over that in detail, but just to preface, you don't have as much time as you anticipate. Even if you know, let's say I get out of class at 3 p.m. on a day, and that means, and I would probably stop doing work at about 11. That's a lot of time, but actually not all of that time is going to be spent doing work, and not all of that time you do spend doing work is going to be productive time, or at the very least, you're just not going to get as much done as you expect. So you have to be realistic, and also don't get distracted, but you do need to take breaks, and I'll explain all of that. So when you plan out how much time you have, you don't have to use an Excel document or anything. I just used it because I thought it was a good visual, but it basically just, you should know how much time you have in a day based on, your prior schedule, assuming that you know what kind of things you have. If you have, you like to work out, if you have classes at a certain time, if you, need a certain amount of time to eat, if you have other activities, extracurriculars, Showering, right? Most people can't shower in 5 minutes, or at least if they do shower in 5 minutes, it's not actually 5 minutes between the time they get in and are out with clothes on. So you have to account for everything. And you would think, looking at this day, oh, that's a lot of time. You wake up at 8 and you go to bed at 11:30, but really, it's not. So classes themselves actually don't take up that much time from my day. As you can see, it's about 3-4 hours maybe. But then there's a lab that I have in the evening. That's 3 hours. Really, it's 2.5, but allow 3 most of the time, just because I like to get there a little early. And there's also, well, I like to relax in the morning and the evening. It doesn't matter when you relax, but I will say, if you're spending the entire day working, you're not going to be efficient. You need to stop at some point, do something that's not related to your work. Could be even 30 minutes during the day, whatever you do. Now, that relaxation time also includes, well, I do have breakfast considered on the schedule in terms of eating, but sometimes if I want to have a snack afterwards, if I'm still hungry, or I don't know, if I want to do something else, maybe read some news articles or something, you just need that time to decompress. And also, you can see I did include eating, as I said, and getting ready for class. Most of the time, you don't get straight out of bed and are ready to go. You have to do things, pack up your stuff, brush your teeth, and all that. And it's not actually 30 minutes, but the way I set this up, it's just 30-minute blocks, so whatever. So, let's get to my actual method. Now that you know your time is not what you think it is, most likely, so most of the time what I do, to start out the year, I pretty much go through the first week or two and figure out what assignments I have. And for most classes, it's pretty much going to be consistent. And if it's not, they'll tell you, like, okay, you have this assignment due whenever, and you need to start it by whenever. And so they'll give you all that in advance for the most part. So when you have an idea of what work you have for the week, you can generally plan out, based on your classes, your extracurriculars, anything else that you do, what days you're going to work on it. So, disclaimer about this, what I have up here, it's actually pretty bare bones. So a lot of the time, I'll include a lot of details for each task. Like, for example, if I have a homework assignment and there's a problem that the professor said, oh, you need to make this change or use this strategy, I will include that. Or if specifically there's something that we addressed in some way, whether it was out of class or, the professor, I had to ask a question or something before I started, pretty much anything. And you don't have to do that, but I like to. It can be as detailed as you want. Detail's useful, though. And as for studying, I like to review my notes every day, not like every single, I have 5 classes, so I don't review all 5 classes every day, but if I have 3 classes in a day, the next day I'll generally look at those notes again for those 3 classes. So you can't do it all in one day, but you do, I think, have to study a little bit, even if it's not, you can have an exam a month out. It does help. Just take 5 minutes and look at your class notes, and you'll actually find when you go to study, it'll be interesting because you don't actually need to study as much as you thought because you looked over it a little bit before. And, of course, if you're confused on something, you should ask. You don't want to be confused, even if, as I said, the exam isn't for a month. Better to address that when you just covered the material than go back 3 weeks from then and say, I don't know what I was thinking, I don't understand this. And that would just not be fun. So the method that I just talked about, basically listing everything out, planning it based on how much time you have during the week, you can do that with studying too. And the example that I included here, it's pretty basic. There are only 4 topics. Of course, those topics cover multiple lectures, but I find at least if let's say you have 4 lectures on a certain topic, you don't need to spend 4 separate nights reviewing those. First of all, that's way too long. It would take forever to get through the material, and you pretty much know it at that point. You don't know everything, but you have an idea, you've learned it, so it shouldn't take as long. But I like to break it up into topics, and it looks really simple in this case, but sometimes it's not. And especially for finals, if you want to make a plan, like say 2 weeks out, you're going to start studying and you know exactly what topics to cover, that helps. Especially because a lot of people don't actually plan it. And then, finals week will be in a few days, and then they'll say, I should probably start doing something, but I have no idea what to do. And so, yeah, just plan it out. You don't have to be detailed. You don't have to really even make a list if you can just remember. I always like to make a list and then highlight whatever I reviewed the previous night so that I know where I'm going to resume. And as I said, in this case, it's pretty stupid to do that, but it helps, I think, to at least have an idea. Enough on that, though. I would like to quickly... This isn't terribly relevant, but I think it's important to cover that procrastination is bad, but being proactive can be worse. And that sounds really weird because everyone tells you to be proactive. How could it possibly be worse? But if you start an assignment, let's say I have a homework due Wednesday. So the homework is due Wednesday. The next day, the professor gives the next assignment. So you have, and assuming that it's always due on Wednesday, which normally is, so you would have 6 days to do it. If you start it Friday night and finish it Saturday, that's not going to do you much good because by the time class rolls around, you're not going to remember anything of what you did. And then, of course, come exam time, you're still not going to remember. And if you spread it out, if you do it closer to when the homework is due, chances are you will retain it better. So I always like to split up assignments, even if it's something really fast. Like if you've got 3 problems to do 1 problem a day. Doesn't make much of a difference in terms of time management. If you have 2 hours on Tuesday and 2 hours on Wednesday, it doesn't matter when you do it. You just do it, and it takes the same amount of time, and you retain it better. And actually, there are plenty of studies that have shown short intervals of repetition do help retain memory. That's generally for studying, but you know what? If you're doing problems, you're going to remember the material better if you at least spend more than 1 day on it. Don't do it all in 1 day. That's the worst thing you can do. So as for actually writing all of that stuff out, I have Google Docs, and I use just a document for all my homework and other obligations that I have throughout the day, but you can do whatever you want. There are so many other tools out there. There are planners, like physical planners if you want those. Google Calendar, you can use apps. I know of at least 3 or 4 different apps that help with time management, or at least help you list out your tasks. It doesn't matter what you do. You can even use pencil and paper. You can just write it out. I wouldn't do that, but you know what? Whatever works for you. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you have some way of writing out what tasks you have, and then planning out when you're going to do them. And if you can do that, then you're in good shape. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you do have to be realistic. Assignments do take longer than you think, and it's really easy, if a class is especially easy, to fall into a routine of, this assignment is going to be a piece of cake, it's going to take an hour, and then, especially if you're in a STEM class, or I guess if, you're in a language arts or writing or whatever class, some kind of humanity or social science, sometimes you can have assignments that take longer than you expect, but especially with STEM. You can be given a problem, and if you don't actually look at it and anticipate it taking longer than expected, you could spend like 2 hours on it. And yes, I have spent 2 hours on a single problem. Some problems are just impossibly hard. And so just if you don't have much time in a day, don't expect to get much done. It sounds so ridiculously obvious, but there'll be times, as I said, you think a homework assignment is going to take an hour, and it takes 3, and then suddenly you're screwed because you expected to have those other 2 hours for something else. And yeah, so always expect, I always like to leave 50% cushion. So like, if you think a homework assignment is going to take 2 hours, give yourself 3. And the worst thing that can happen is you finish early and you can do whatever you want. You have free time. Or if you want to, study for an exam or something, or if you wanted to do something else and you didn't have time to do it, you can do it. So there is no harm in expecting assignments to take a long time. There's only good, and it can be really bad if you don't expect that. About distractions, especially with all of the electronic devices we've got today, it's really easy to, even for 5 minutes, look at something and then you get carried away. Let's say you're, just as a random example, say it's finals week. You're not going to be studying from 8 a.m. to midnight most of the time. You're going to be taking some breaks. And let's say, you want to take a 30-minute break and watch something on Netflix. And then the next time you look up, it's actually been like 2 hours. And I can't tell you how many people, they say the time management thing that they've tried, whatever strategy they've been using, it just doesn't work. Most of the time it's because they get distracted and they'll sit down and maybe want to play video games for an hour, and it'll be 3 hours later and they'll realize, crap, it's been 3 hours. So don't use distractions. If you like watching YouTube, playing video games, doing anything, it can even be something mundane like, I don't know, reading the news. Just make sure that your work is done before you start that, because unless you've got like literally one assignment and you've got 10 hours to do it, it's very easy to get carried away and then suddenly you don't have enough time. So don't get distracted. If you can control yourself and actually take half an hour, then go ahead, but most people can't. And then the ever-popular social media, what about that? So it's pretty much the same idea, but in general, don't use it. Just don't. Am I saying that you can't have a Twitter account and post tweets? No, you should be able to do that, but don't actually use it when you're trying to do work. And I'll also mention in a bit about breaks. Just be careful. If you can take 15 minutes to scroll through Twitter, that's great. I don't know of many people who can actually limit themselves when they do that, so just know your limits, and in general, stay away from social media when you're trying to do work, especially if you've got notifications set on your laptop or your phone. Maybe block those temporarily. Don't get distracted by social media. It's the worst thing you can do, because that is something where it is very easy to, sink a couple hours in without intending to. All right, so one of the last things to talk about, taking breaks. So I know a lot of people that try to work 24/7. Not literally, but they get 4 hours of sleep. The time that they're not spending in class, they're spending studying or doing homework assignments, and literally they do nothing else. Now, there are people who can do that, but can they do it efficiently? Probably not. It's going to be much to your advantage, even if you don't think you have that much time, and if you don't, of course. It really does help. Like every 1 to 2 hours, if you're studying, if you're just doing a homework assignment, whatever, just take a break, take 10 minutes and do something. Stretch, walk around. Maybe, as I said, if you can control yourself, use social media. I don't know. I sometimes like to go into one of the apps on my phone and just play around for 10 minutes. Make sure you can control yourself, of course, but you do have to stop working every once in a while, or else you're just gonna, you might not even realize, but you will become less efficient over time. And of course, make sure you have something fun to look forward to every week. It doesn't have to be every day or every other day even, but if there's not something you actually like doing outside of class and you're trying to get through an entire semester like that, it's just going to be miserable. So if you have even one thing that you're looking forward to on the weekend, that is generally enough, at least for me, and people I know, this is enough to get through the week. Otherwise, your efficiency is also going to go down, and you're just going to be depressed. And I don't know of anyone who likes being depressed, so let's try to include something fun. Why not? Oh, and then another thing that I hear people say, they don't want to do time management. They think it's going to take too long, it's tedious. It couldn't be the opposite. Well, it is the opposite, is what I mean. So it takes about 15 minutes for me whenever I'm looking at my week and planning things out. You should have 15 minutes in a day. Even if you need to cut it to sleep, 15 minutes is nothing. You can cut out 15 minutes. Go to bed 15 minutes later. And then, of course, you got to stay ahead of assignments, right? Or at least keep up with them. But you don't want to fall behind. The only way to do that is to plan your time. You can't just spontaneously know in your brain with 4 or 5 classes exactly when you're going to do them to stay ahead. I don't know anyone like that, so you have to plan. And it's really nice just to wake up every day and know exactly what work I have. I generally plan on the weekends, although it doesn't have to be then. It can be whenever you want. So like Friday or Saturday after classes, I'll sit down, take the 10 to 15 minutes, write out when I'm going to do everything, and when I start my week, like Monday morning, I know, all right, I've got these assignments to do, and that's it. And then, of course, you can put in as much as you want. If you want to include your classes, like if you use Google Calendars or extracurriculars, you can. I just write down the homework because I know when my classes are and if I have some kind of meeting to go to or something. But as I said, whatever you want to do, just make sure you plan it. All right, that's pretty much everything, but just to summarize quickly here, planning your work each day, be as detailed as you want. I already talked plenty about that. So also you got to learn what methods work for you, be it a planner, Google Calendar, etc. It can be anything. Just make sure that you write things down. Give yourself more time than you need. I also talked a lot about that. And of course, don't get distracted. Stay focused. Distractions will hurt you. And anyone who has been a procrastinator in the past or is still a procrastinator, they know. It's really easy to sit down, and if you don't want to do an assignment, spend 3 hours doing something else, and then you come back and you feel awful. And it's just so much more satisfying to get your work done and not procrastinate, and then, have those couple hours in the evening to do whatever you want. It's great, honestly. And yes, even as an engineering student, I do actually have time to relax and do whatever I want. During the week, sometimes variable. Sometimes I'll have 1 hour between 5 days. Sometimes I'll have 10. It depends. But I always manage to have a little bit of time. And I think it's all because of time management. Don't get distracted, and all of the other things that I talked about. So that's it. Thanks for listening. And there are the citations.